Welcome to Whispers After Midnight. Imagine standing powerless as your own family is torn away from you, your wife, your children, sold right before your eyes. Today we dive into the astonishing true story of Daniel in 1858, a man who faced the unimaginable and achieved the impossible. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell, because so much research and true historical digging went into uncovering this story. Before the darkness arrived, Daniel's life seemed simple, but it was full of the kind of happiness that comes from family, routine, and small victories. It was 1858, and he lived in a quiet rural town, a place where everyone knew each other's names and life moved slowly. Daniel was a hard-working man, known for his honesty and dedication. He had a modest home with his wife, Mary, and their two young children, a son and a daughter, who brought laughter and energy to every corner of the household. Every morning, the sun would rise over the fields, painting the world in golden light. Daniel would rise first, tending to the small plot of land that provided food and a little income. Mary would prepare breakfast, the aroma of fresh bread filling the home, and gently rouse the children to get ready for their day. The family would eat together, a simple meal of porridge or eggs, exchanging stories, dreams, and plans. Evenings were their favorite time, candles flickering, the children laughing as they recounted their adventures, and Daniel and Mary sharing quiet conversations about the future. Neighbors admired the household. Daniel and Mary were considered a model family in the community, not wealthy, but content, loving, and respected. The children played freely, safe under their parents' watchful eyes. Daniel's world was one of security and hope, where every day, though ordinary, was precious. Yet, beneath this calm surface, the world around them was fraught with dangers. Slavery, economic hardship, and societal tensions were constants, especially in 1858. Families like Daniel's lived with the unspoken fear that life could change in a single moment. But Daniel never imagined how swiftly and mercilessly that change would come. The sense of safety he felt was fragile, and it would soon be shattered in a way that no parent should ever endure. This peaceful life, the laughter of children, the warmth of family, and the quiet satisfaction of a simple, honest existence, was the stage on which the unimaginable tragedy would unfold. It was the calm before a storm that would test every ounce of Daniel's courage, ingenuity, and heart. Daniel had barely finished his morning chores when the first signs of danger appeared, a distant commotion, shouting voices, and the sound of hooves pounding the dirt roads. At first, he thought it was just travelers passing through or neighbors arguing. But within moments, the truth hit him like a lightning bolt. Strangers were storming toward his home, moving with a purpose that chilled him to the bone. Panic set in as he ran toward the house, heart hammering, mind racing. Mary was outside, trying to gather the children, but the intruders were fast, armed, and merciless. Daniel's hands shook as he shouted warnings, but his voice was swallowed by the chaos. The attackers, men who had come to claim his family, were relentless, tearing through the small homestead with brutal efficiency. The children clung to their mother, terrified and crying as Daniel tried to block the intruders. Every second stretched into an eternity. He could see the fear in Mary's eyes, the disbelief in his children's expressions, and the horrifying reality that he might not be able to stop what was about to happen. His pleas fell on deaf ears. The men were not interested in mercy or negotiation. The home, once a sanctuary filled with laughter and warmth, became a battleground of desperation. Furniture was overturned, possessions ripped from walls, and the air was thick with fear and shouting. Daniel realized he was outnumbered and powerless. This was no ordinary threat. These men were here for one purpose: to separate him from the people he loved most. It was in those crushing moments that Daniel's world fractured. His sense of safety, the life he had built, and the simple peace of his family's daily routine vanished before his eyes. The attack was sudden, ruthless, and utterly incomprehensible. And as the men moved to take Mary and the children away, Daniel faced a pain so profound it left him breathless, a helplessness he had never known, staring as his family was ripped from his arms and sold, piece by piece, into a future he could not imagine. That day, Daniel's life changed forever. What had started as an ordinary morning ended in heartbreak, despair, and the beginning of a story that would test the limits of human courage and ingenuity. After the violent attack, Daniel found himself powerless, forced to watch the unimaginable unfold. Mary and the children were separated from him, her hands trembling as she held onto the little ones, trying desperately to shield them from the merciless strangers. Daniel's heart pounded with terror and disbelief. He could barely breathe, each second stretching into an eternity, as he realized that this was no simple threat. This was the systematic destruction of his family. The men who had stormed the home began taking them to the nearby market, where human lives were bought and sold like property. Daniel's mind screamed in denial. This can't be happening. This isn't real, he thought, but the sight in front of him confirmed it. His wife, his children, the very people he lived for, were being auctioned off to strangers who saw them only as objects. He tried to intervene, but each attempt was met with force. He was shoved back, his pleas ignored, and the cruel reality of his powerlessness weighed on him like a stone. From a distance he watched as Mary's eyes locked with his, a silent scream passing between them. In that look, Daniel felt her fear, her sorrow, and her unspoken plea: survive. Find us. Don't give up. The auction itself was a blur of faces, numbers and voices. People called out bids as if discussing livestock, not a mother and her children. Daniel felt the world tilt, a suffocating sense of helplessness taking over. Every bid, every hand raised, was a reminder that the life he had built, the family he loved, was being parceled out to strangers. He could see the children clinging to each other, their innocence shattered in an instant. Their tiny hands reached for him, and he felt a pain so deep it threatened to break him completely. And yet, even in the midst of this horror, a spark of determination ignited within Daniel. Witnessing the sale, feeling the injustice and cruelty of it all, something inside him shifted. The despair that threatened to consume him transformed into a burning resolve. He would not let this be the end. Somehow, against all odds, he vowed, he would find a way to undo the unimaginable. That day, Daniel experienced heartbreak like no other, a pain that would haunt him forever, but it also marked the moment when despair became determination. From witnessing the sale of his wife and children, Daniel's journey toward the impossible had begun. After witnessing the unthinkable, the sale of his wife and children, Daniel was left alone in a world that suddenly felt cruel and meaningless. The bustling life of his home, the laughter of his children, and the warmth of Mary's embrace were gone, replaced by a deafening silence that echoed through his soul. Every step he took felt heavy, every breath a reminder of the family he had lost. Daniel wandered through his now empty home, his hands trembling as he touched the furniture, the small toys left behind, the dishes still warm from the morning meal. Each familiar object became a dagger, a reminder of the life that had been ripped from him. He sank to the floor, head in his hands, and for the first time, allowed himself to feel the full weight of despair. The heartbreak was crushing. He replayed the scenes in his mind endlessly, their terrified faces, Mary's pleading eyes, the children clinging to her. He imagined every possible horror that could befall them under strangers' control. The sense of helplessness was overwhelming. Daniel knew that society offered him no easy path to justice. The law, the townspeople, even his own strength, could not simply undo what had happened. Sleep became impossible. His nights were filled with dreams of his family trapped, alone, and suffering. He saw visions of them in danger, calling for him, while he was powerless to reach them. His days were no easier. The world went on around him, indifferent to his pain, as he struggled to maintain a fragile appearance of normalcy. People in the town might have seen a man walking along the streets, but inside Daniel was collapsing, torn apart by grief and helplessness. And yet, within this abyss of despair, something remarkable began to grow. Daniel's heartbreak slowly transformed into a quiet, burning resolve. He realized that succumbing to sorrow would not bring Mary and the children back. If he wanted to see them again, he would have to endure the pain, push through it, and take action. Every tear, every sleepless night, every pang of agony became fuel for his determination. In this darkness, Daniel began to plot, not with recklessness, but with a careful, desperate clarity. He understood that the path ahead would be dangerous, nearly impossible, and full of uncertainty. But despair had lit a fire within him, a fire that would drive him toward achieving what no one could imagine, rescuing the family that had been stolen from him. The heartbreak and despair he endured were immense. But it was also the crucible that forged the courage and ingenuity Daniel would need to defy the impossible. After days of grief and sleepless nights, Daniel realized that mourning alone would not reunite him with Mary and the children. The despair that had consumed him began to sharpen into something else: focused strategy and an unrelenting determination. He knew that he was facing a nearly impossible challenge. The legal and social systems of 1858 offered little to no recourse for a man trying to reclaim a family torn from him. But Daniel was not a man who would bow to impossibility. He began quietly, observing the men who had taken his family, listening to rumors in town, and gathering every scrap of information he could. Where were his wife and children taken? Who controlled them? What were their routines, weaknesses, and the patterns of the people holding them? Every detail mattered. Even small hints from neighbors, passing travelers, or casual gossip could be a key piece of the puzzle. At first, his plans were humble, mere possibilities that existed in his mind. How could he approach this without alerting the captors? Could he sneak in under the cover of night, or use persuasion bribes, or cunning to get them back? Every option carried enormous risk, but Daniel weighed each one with a precision born of desperation. He sketched mental maps, rehearsed conversations, and imagined scenarios over and over. He also began to prepare himself physically and mentally. Daniel knew he would need stamina, courage, and quick thinking. The thought of confronting armed men, hostile conditions, or even strangers who might harm his family was terrifying, but he refused to let fear paralyze him. Every step he took was methodical, each action a preparation for the moment when he would have to act. Importantly, Daniel understood he could not do this alone. He quietly reached out to trusted allies, friends and neighbors who could provide information, assistance, or cover. These were ordinary people who, like him, were outraged by the injustice and willing to take risks for the sake of family and morality. He shared little, revealing just enough to gain support without endangering anyone unnecessarily. In these initial planning stages, Daniel transformed from a man paralyzed by heartbreak into a strategist fueled by determination. Each detail he gathered, every ally he secured, and every mental scenario he played out brought him one step closer to the seemingly impossible goal: rescuing his family. By the time he began to move from planning to action, Daniel was no longer just a grieving husband and father. He had become a man capable of confronting danger, outwitting cruelty, and challenging fate itself. The first sparks of what would become an extraordinary journey were ignited here, in the quiet, relentless preparation to reclaim the family he loved. Even with careful planning, Daniel quickly realized that rescuing his family would not just be dangerous, it would be almost unimaginable. The world of 1858 was stacked against him in every way. Laws were rigid and unjust, offering little protection to someone trying to reclaim loved ones who had been taken. Society itself turned a blind eye to these acts, and the very institutions that might have helped often favored the powerful over the powerless. For Daniel, that meant every step forward carried enormous risk. He was an ordinary man, with no military training, no political influence, and no wealth. The men who held his family were ruthless, often armed, and motivated by greed. Their power was sanctioned by the society around them, and crossing them risking not only his life, but also the safety of those who might assist him. One wrong move, one slip of information, could spell disaster. Traveling alone to find his family was almost impossible. Roads were poorly maintained, towns were miles apart, and strangers could be dangerous. He had to navigate a landscape filled with hidden threats, thieves, corrupt officials, and even neighbors who might report him if they suspected he was planning something daring. The odds of success were slim, and every decision required careful consideration. Worse yet, social norms and laws constrained him in ways that added layers of complexity. Daniel could not openly challenge the captors without risking arrest or retaliation. He could not simply march into a market and demand his family back. Such actions could land him in jail or worse. Every action had to be calculated, discreet, and clever. Despite these staggering obstacles, Daniel refused to surrender. He recognized that success would require more than courage. It would require ingenuity, patience, and an ability to think several steps ahead. He could not rely on brute force alone. He had to outsmart men who were armed, determined, and supported by a society that condoned their actions. The danger and restrictions only sharpened his resolve. Every challenge became a puzzle to solve, a locked gate to bypass, a guard to distract, a law to navigate. The impossible odds were not a deterrent, they were a call to ingenuity. Daniel understood that if he wanted to achieve the unimaginable, he would have to operate in shadows, plan with precision, and act with unwavering courage. At this stage, Daniel's journey was no longer just about love or family. It was about survival, strategy, and the audacity to challenge a world built to keep him powerless. The odds were stacked against him, but every obstacle only fueled his determination to achieve what seemed utterly impossible. As Daniel faced the seemingly impossible task of rescuing his wife and children, he realized he could not do it alone. The obstacles were immense, the captors ruthless, and the laws of 1858 offered him no protection. But in the shadows of fear and despair, unexpected hope emerged in the form of secret allies, people willing to risk everything to help him in his quest. These allies were not heroes in the traditional sense. They were ordinary men and women, neighbors, travelers, even strangers, who had witnessed injustice and felt a spark of moral outrage. Some had lost loved ones themselves. Others simply could not bear to watch cruelty unfold unchecked. They were willing to provide information, safe passage, or even temporary shelter, all at great personal risk. Daniel began quietly reaching out, carefully assessing who he could trust. One neighbor, a quiet and observant man, had seen the captors moving through the area and was able to provide crucial intelligence about their routines and whereabouts. Another ally, a woman who ran a small inn on a nearby road, offered discreet passage and cover, pretending Daniel was just a traveler passing through. Even seemingly insignificant observations, a carriage taking a longer route, the timing of market days, became critical intelligence in Daniel's hands. The support he received was not just practical, it was emotional. Each whispered warning, each subtle gesture of solidarity reminded him that he was not alone. It gave him courage when despair threatened to overwhelm him. The small acts of trust and bravery from these allies created a network that Daniel could rely on, allowing him to plan moves that would have been impossible otherwise. But there was danger in every interaction. One slip, one misjudged ally, and the entire plan could collapse. Daniel had to test loyalty carefully, observing reactions, gauging intentions, and maintaining secrecy. Trust had to be earned, and each person he enlisted was a calculated risk. These secret allies became the lifeline that transformed Daniel's desperation into possibility. With their guidance, he learned about hidden paths, safe houses, and timing that would give him the advantage over his captors. Even in a world designed to keep him powerless, these unexpected allies became the foundation for hope, showing Daniel that ingenuity combined with human kindness could tip the scales, even against impossible odds. Through this network, Daniel was no longer just a lone man facing a cruel world. He became part of a quiet resistance, a force moving in the shadows, patiently assembling the pieces that would allow him to achieve the unimaginable. Every alley, every secret message, every small act of courage brought him one step closer to the day he would confront his fears and reclaim his family. With plans forming and allies quietly supporting him, Daniel knew it was time to act. But the path to his family was perilous, a treacherous journey that tested every ounce of his courage, wit, and endurance. The roads were long, unpaved, and fraught with dangerous hostile strangers, patrolling guards, and unforgiving terrain that could delay or even prevent him from reaching his goal. Daniel traveled mostly under cover of darkness, moving silently through forests, across fields, and along hidden paths that few dared to tread. Every step carried risk. One wrong move, a snapped branch, a chance encounter, or a misjudged distance, could alert the captors to his presence and endanger his family's lives. Each night, he rested only briefly, always aware that time was against him, and that the longer he delayed, the greater the danger to Mary and the children. Hunger, exhaustion, and exposure added to the physical toll. Daniel had to forage for food, sometimes relying on the small kindness of strangers, sometimes enduring long stretches with nothing to eat. The elements were relentless, scorching days, freezing nights, and sudden storms tested his endurance and resolve. Every mile he traveled was a battle between human frailty and unbreakable determination. But the greatest danger was always human. The men who had taken his family were cunning, suspicious, and constantly moving their property. to avoid detection. Daniel had to anticipate their moves, decode patterns, and stay several steps ahead. There were moments when he had to hide in the shadows, holding his breath as guards passed by within feet of him. The fear of discovery was constant, yet it sharpened his senses, making him quicker, more alert, and more determined than ever. Along the journey, Daniel relied on the network of secret allies he had built. Some provided temporary refuge, others warned him of patrols or delays. He learned to communicate in whispers, signals, and coded messages, turning ordinary towns and forests into a map of survival. Every small advantage, every piece of intelligence, could mean the difference between life and death, for him and for his family. Through exhaustion, fear, and nearly insurmountable obstacles, Daniel pressed forward. Each step brought him closer to the people he loved. Each risk was fueled by a singular purpose: to reunite with Mary and the children and defy the cruelty that had torn them apart. His journey was a test of endurance, courage, and ingenuity, a treacherous path that would push him to the very edge of human possibility. And yet, even in the darkest moments, Daniel never wavered. The thought of his family, their terrified eyes, and the life that had been stolen from them kept him moving forward. Every danger he faced, every hardship endured, brought him closer to the day when desperation would transform into triumph, and when the impossible would finally come within reach. As Daniel drew closer to his family, he realized that courage alone would not be enough. The men holding Mary and the children were cunning, unpredictable, and heavily guarded. To succeed, Daniel would need more than bravery. He would need strategy, ingenuity, and an almost fearless willingness to take calculated risks. He began to observe the captors meticulously, noting their habits, shifts, and vulnerabilities. When they traveled between towns, Daniel followed at a safe distance, hiding in the shadows, blending into the crowds, and even using natural cover like forests and hills. Every movement was deliberate, every pause measured, because one mistake could alert them to his presence. Daniel also relied on misdirection and deception. At times, he created distractions, sounds in the distance, false trails, or carefully placed objects, to draw attention away from his real objective. He learned to read human behavior with uncanny precision, predicting when the guards would grow careless or when the captor's confidence might give him an opening. Every daring action was calculated, balancing extreme risk with the possibility of success. On one crucial occasion, Daniel infiltrated a small settlement where his family was being held temporarily. He disguised himself as a laborer, speaking little, moving with the crowd, and pretending to be just another traveler. He memorized the layout of the area, identified escape routes, and even discovered weak points in the captor's watch. This required nerves of steel. One glance the wrong way, one suspicious question, and the entire plan could collapse. He also used timing as a weapon. Daniel understood that patience could be as powerful as boldness. He waited for moments when guards were distracted, when the streets were empty, or when the captor's confidence lulled them into complacency. These moments were fleeting, and Daniel had to act with lightning precision to exploit them. Communication with his allies was equally ingenious. He developed subtle signals, hidden notes, gestures, and coded messages to coordinate movements without alerting anyone. Every piece of intelligence from his allies was woven into his plan like threads in a tapestry, each detail increasing the odds that he could reach his family safely. Daniel's strategy combined audacity with intelligence. He risked his life repeatedly, slipping past armed men, navigating dangerous terrain, and outsmarting those who believed they were in complete control. Each daring action brought him one step closer to reuniting with Mary and the children, and every success, no matter how small, strengthened his resolve. By the time Daniel was within reach of his family, he had become a master of stealth, deception, and cunning, an ordinary man transformed into an extraordinary force by love, desperation, and the unshakable belief that he would not fail. The impossible was no longer just a dream. It was within his grasp, waiting for him to take it. After a grueling journey filled with danger, fear, and painstaking planning, Daniel finally reached the place where his wife and children were being held. His heart raced, not with fear, but with an almost unbearable anticipation. Every step brought him closer to the people he loved most in the world, yet every step was shadowed by the fear that something could go wrong at the last moment. When he finally laid eyes on Mary, she was surrounded by strangers, her face pale and drawn, but her eyes, oh, those eyes, locked onto his. All the months of despair, anguish, and determination converged into a single moment. The recognition, the relief, and the overwhelming love they shared made time feel suspended. Daniel's children, seeing their father after such a long, terrifying separation, ran toward him with uncontainable emotion, their cries and laughter blending in a mixture of joy and relief. For Daniel, the reunion was more than a physical act. It was an emotional catharsis. Tears streamed down his face as he embraced Mary, holding her as if never to let go again. The children clung to him, trembling from fear, exhaustion, and the sheer intensity of the moment. Every heartbeat, every sob, every whispered word was a testament to the unbreakable bond that had survived cruelty, separation, and near impossible odds. The captors, shocked and caught off guard by Daniel's daring approach, were powerless to stop the reunion. Their authority, their intimidation, and their greed were no match for a father's love and a husband's determination. What had seemed impossible, a family torn apart and sold, was undone not by force alone, but by strategy, courage, and unwavering resolve. In that instant, the emotional weight of months of suffering lifted. Daniel felt joy, relief, and a profound sense of vindication, tempered by the lingering awareness of what they had endured. The reunion was not just a personal victory. It was a triumph over a world that had tried to strip him of his family, a defiance of the cruelty and injustice that had threatened to destroy them. Yet, the moment was also tender and fragile. The family's trauma could not vanish instantly. Daniel held Mary and the children close, whispering words of comfort, promising safety, and vowing that nothing like this would ever happen again. Every hug, every tear, every whispered reassurance was a promise, a pledge to rebuild their lives together after the unimaginable ordeal. This moment of reunion, filled with raw emotion and overwhelming relief, became the turning point of Daniel's story. It was proof that courage, intelligence, and relentless determination could overcome even the darkest circumstances. And for anyone witnessing this story, it serves as a reminder that hope can endure, even in the face of the impossible. Reuniting with his family was only the beginning. Daniel's actions didn't just defy the cruelty of his captors, they challenged the very society and legal system of 1858. In a world where laws were heavily skewed against men like him, and where the sale of families was normalized and legally sanctioned, his success was extraordinary. Daniel had accomplished what most would have considered impossible, even reckless in the eyes of the law. The laws of the time offered little protection for a man trying to reclaim his wife and children. Property rights, economic interests, and societal hierarchies worked against anyone who tried to intervene in such transactions. A direct confrontation could have led to arrest, imprisonment, or violence. But Daniel's ingenuity allowed him to operate outside these constraints. By moving in secrecy, carefully planning every step, and relying on discreet allies, he found a loophole that no law or expectation could block. Beyond legality, Daniel defied the social norms of the era. Men in his position were expected to endure loss quietly, to accept the system, and to avoid challenging those in power. But Daniel refused to accept that fate. His actions were not just daring, they were revolutionary in their courage and moral clarity. He demonstrated that ordinary people, armed with determination and cleverness, could confront systemic injustice and emerge victorious. Daniel also defied expectations in the face of sheer danger. People in his town, upon learning of his mission, would have assumed failure was inevitable. No one had ever dared such a risky endeavor and succeeded. He overcame not only the physical obstacles, the guards, patrols, and treacherous terrain, but also the psychological odds. Doubt, fear, and exhaustion could have destroyed him, yet he pressed forward, showing that the human spirit could triumph where the law, society, and circumstance would have otherwise condemned him. His defiance sent a quiet, powerful message: courage, planning, and relentless love could rewrite what society deemed impossible. Daniel didn't just rescue his family, he became an example of extraordinary human determination, proving that even in the harshest of times, one person could challenge injustice and achieve the unimaginable. This defiance was not reckless, it was precise, intentional, and heroic. Daniel's success wasn't just about beating the odds, it was about rewriting them entirely. The laws, the expectations, and the societal norms had underestimated him, and he proved that the heart, mind, and courage of one determined man could surpass them all. The moment Daniel reunited with Mary and the children was breathtaking, but the story didn't end there. The aftermath of such a daring and dangerous mission was as complex as the journey itself, filled with relief, lingering trauma, and a mix of awe and shock from the surrounding community. For Daniel's family, the reunion was overwhelming. Mary clung to him, still trembling from fear, exhaustion, and months of uncertainty. The children, though finally safe, struggled to process the terror they had endured. Daniel's presence brought immense comfort, but the emotional scars ran deep. Nights were filled with whispered reassurances, gentle rocking, and the quiet rebuilding of trust. The family had survived a nightmare, but the journey back to normalcy would take time. Within the community, Daniel's actions sent ripples of astonishment and admiration. News of his daring rescue spread quickly. People whispered about the man who had defied the law, evaded dangerous captors, and brought his family home against all odds. Many saw him as a symbol of courage and ingenuity, a man who refused to bow to injustice. His story inspired awe, as neighbors marveled at the bravery it took to risk life and freedom for love and family. At the same time, there were skeptics and critics. Some questioned the legality of his actions or feared that defiance of the law could bring trouble to the entire town. Others worried about the risks he had taken, fearing for Daniel's safety or the potential for retaliation from the men he had outwitted. But Daniel's courage was undeniable, and the joy of his family's safe return outweighed the murmurs of doubt. For Daniel, the aftermath was also a time of reflection. He had faced unimaginable loss and danger, but his relentless determination had transformed tragedy into triumph. The experience reshaped his understanding of strength, resilience, and the power of human ingenuity. He knew that the scars of this ordeal would remain, but he also understood that he had achieved something remarkable, not just survival, but the reclamation of what had been stolen. In the years that followed, the story of Daniel's courage became part of local law. His actions left a lasting impression on the community, a testament to what one man could achieve when love, determination, and intelligence combined. Daniel's family, though forever marked by the trauma they endured, emerged stronger and more united, their bond tested and proven unbreakable. The aftermath was more than relief, it was a transformation. It showed that even in the harshest conditions, hope, courage, and perseverance could prevail, inspiring everyone who heard of Daniel's extraordinary journey. Daniel's story did not end with the reunion of his family. It became a lasting testament to the power of courage, hope, and resilience in the face of overwhelming adversity. What he achieved in 1858 was more than a personal victory. It was a demonstration that even ordinary people could confront unimaginable obstacles and prevail. His actions left a legacy for his family first and foremost. Mary and the children carried forward the lessons of his bravery, learning that love and determination could defy the harshest circumstances. They grew up with the memory of his unwavering resolve, a reminder that family could survive even when society and the world seemed determined to tear it apart. Daniel's courage became the foundation for their own resilience, inspiring them to face life's challenges with strength and hope. Beyond his family, Daniel's story resonated through the community. Word of his daring rescue spread like wildfire, capturing the imagination of neighbors, travelers, and anyone who heard of his deeds. People admired not only his bravery, but his cleverness and patience, qualities that allowed him to succeed where others might have failed. His story became an example of what could be achieved when one refused to accept injustice and dared to act boldly. The legacy was not just in admiration, it was in inspiration. Daniel showed that hope was not passive, it was an active force. He demonstrated that even in the darkest moments, determination and careful planning could create miracles. His courage reminded people that human beings have the capacity to challenge cruelty and oppression, to fight against the impossible, and to reclaim what was precious. Over time, the tale of Daniel's journey became a symbol of resilience. Families told it to children as a story of strength, neighbors recounted it to inspire bravery, and historians would later recognize it as an extraordinary account of human determination. Daniel's life illustrated that true heroism is not only in physical feats, but in the unwavering commitment to what is just, moral, and deeply human. Ultimately, Daniel's legacy endures because it speaks to something universal, the unbreakable bond of family, the transformative power of courage, and the hope that even the most devastating circumstances can be overcome. His story reminds us that no obstacle is insurmountable when love fuels determination, and that one person's relentless resolve can leave a mark that echoes far beyond their own life. Daniel's triumph over despair and impossibility became more than history. It became a timeless lesson that hope, courage, and resilience can turn even the darkest tragedy into a story of extraordinary human achievement.